Love is, without question, one of the most profound and universally sought after human experiences. It has been the muse of poets, the subject of philosophical debate, and the central theme of countless stories throughout history. Yet, for all its romanticization, love is also a complex psychological phenomenon, a subject of rigorous scientific inquiry. Psychology seeks to peel back the layers of this intricate emotion to understand its biological underpinnings, its cognitive components, and the behavioral patterns it inspires. This exploration is not meant to diminish its magic, but rather to deepen our appreciation for the forces that shape our most meaningful connections. From the intoxicating rush of initial attraction to the quiet comfort of lifelong companionship, the psychology of love offers a roadmap to understanding why we love, how we love, and what it takes to make love last. Ancient civilizations were the first to attempt a formal classification of love. The ancient Greeks, for instance, did not have a single word for love, but instead identified several distinct varieties. There was eros, the passionate, often erotic love that represents our modern idea of romance. Then came philia, the deep, affectionate love between friends, built on loyalty and shared values. Storge described the natural, familial love between parents and children. And finally, agape, a concept later adopted by theologians, represented a selfless, unconditional love for all of humanity. These early attempts to categorize love highlight a truth that psychology continues to explore: that love is not a monolithic entity, but a multifaceted experience with different forms and functions. One of the most influential modern frameworks for understanding love is Robert Sternberg's triangular theory. Sternberg proposed that love can be understood as a combination of three core components: intimacy, passion, and commitment. Intimacy is the emotional component, encompassing feelings of closeness, connectedness, and bondedness. It's the warmth you feel when sharing your deepest secrets with someone. Passion is the motivational component, the hot part of a relationship. It includes the drives that lead to romance, physical attraction, and sexual consummation. Finally, commitment is the cognitive component. It represents the conscious decision to love someone and to maintain that love through good times and bad. According to Sternberg, these three components interact to form different kinds of love, much like primary colors combine to create a spectrum of hues. For example, if you only have intimacy, you have liking, which is characteristic of many friendships. If you only have passion, you experience infatuation, that head over heels feeling of love at first sight, which can fade as quickly as it appears. If you have only commitment, without intimacy or passion, you are left with empty love, a relationship that may continue out of obligation or necessity long after the emotional connection has died. The theory further combines these components to describe more complex forms of love. A mix of intimacy and passion produces romantic love, a state of being emotionally close and physically attracted, but without a long-term commitment. Think of a whirlwind summer romance, a combination of intimacy and commitment results in companionate love. A deep, affectionate attachment often found in long-term marriages where the initial passion has settled. It's a love built on a foundation of friendship, trust, and shared life. Lastly, fatuous love emerges from passion and commitment without the stabilizing influence of intimacy. This is often a whirlwind courtship and marriage where the commitment is motivated by passion without the deep emotional knowing of the other person. The ultimate goal, according to Sternberg's model, is consummate love, the complete form of love that represents the ideal relationship. In consummate love, all three components, intimacy, passion, and commitment, are present and balanced. Sternberg notes that achieving consummate love is often easier than maintaining it. For a relationship to endure, the components must be nurtured and translated into action. Passion can fade, intimacy can wither, and commitment can be tested. A lasting relationship requires constant effort from both partners to keep all 3 points of the triangle strong. Another compelling model is John Lee's color wheel theory of love, which proposes 6 distinct love styles. Lee categorizes 3 primary styles, which, like primary colors, can be mixed to create secondary styles. The first primary style is Eros, a love style characterized by an intense focus on physical beauty and passionate attraction. The erotic lover falls in love quickly and deeply, idealizing their partner and seeking a strong physical and emotional connection. The second primary style is Ludus, which approaches love as a game to be played. The ludic lover avoids commitment and enjoys the challenge and excitement of the chase. They may juggle multiple partners at once and tend to end relationships when they become too serious or demanding. For the ludic lover, love is about fun and conquest, not deep emotional attachment. The third primary style is Storge, a love that grows slowly out of friendship. It is based on shared interests, affection, and a deep sense of familiarity. The Storgic lover values companionship and stability. Passion may be less intense in these relationships, but the bond is often steady and enduring, built on a foundation of genuine liking and mutual respect. From these 3 primary styles, Lee derives 3 secondary styles. Mania, a combination of Eros and Ludus, is an obsessive, possessive, and highly emotional love. The manic lover experiences intense highs and lows, often feeling a desperate need for their partner's attention and affection. This love style is characterized by jealousy and a constant fear of loss, leading to a turbulent and often painful relationship experience. Pragma, derived from Ludus and Storge, is a practical and logical love style. The pragmatic lover has a shopping list of desired qualities in a partner and approaches relationships in a rational, calculated way. They seek a partner who fits their life goals and criteria, valuing compatibility on practical matters over intense emotional connection. For them, love is a sensible partnership. Finally, agape, a blend of eros and storge, is a selfless, altruistic, and unconditional love. The agapic lover is giving and caring, putting their partner's well-being above their own needs. This style of love is spiritual and all-encompassing, focused on a duty to love without expecting anything in return. Lee considered this style to be quite rare in practice. Beyond these typologies, perhaps the most profound psychological perspective on love comes from attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby. The theory posits that our earliest relationships with our primary caregivers create an internal working model or blueprint for how we approach relationships throughout our lives. The fundamental question this model answers for us is, can I count on others to be there for me when I need them? Mary Ainsworth, a colleague of Bowlby, identified 3 primary attachment styles based on her strange situation, experiments with infants and their mothers. The first and most common is secure attachment. Securely attached infants feel distressed when their caregiver leaves, but are easily soothed upon their return. They see their caregiver as a secure base from which to explore the world. As adults, securely attached individuals tend to be more trusting, have higher self-esteem, and are more comfortable with intimacy, leading to more satisfying and stable relationships. The second style is anxious, ambivalent attachment. These infants are highly distressed when their caregiver leaves and are difficult to soothe upon their return. They may seem clingy, yet also resistant. This is often the result of inconsistent caregiving. As adults, anxious individuals often crave closeness, but live in fear of rejection. They can be perceived as needy or insecure, constantly seeking validation that their partner truly loves them. The third style is anxious, avoidant attachment. Avoidant infants show little to no distress when their caregiver leaves and may actively avoid them upon their return. This style often develops when a caregiver is consistently unavailable or rejecting. As adults, avoidant individuals value independence and self-sufficiency to an extreme. They are uncomfortable with emotional closeness, suppress their feelings, and may see intimate partners as overly demanding or clingy, often creating distance in their relationships. These early attachment patterns are not deterministic, but they are powerful. They shape our expectations of intimacy, our communication styles, and how we cope with conflict in our romantic partnerships. A person with an anxious attachment style might interpret a partner's need for space as a sign of rejection, while a person with an avoidance style might feel suffocated by a partner's desire for closeness. Understanding our own and our partner's attachment style can be a transformative step in building a healthier, more secure relationship. The powerful feelings of love are not just abstract emotions, they are deeply rooted in our brain chemistry. When we fall in love, our brain is flooded with a cocktail of neurochemicals that create feelings of euphoria, pleasure, and obsession. A key player is dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with the brain's reward system. The same chemical is released in response to things like delicious food or addictive drugs. This dopamine surge is what makes early love feel so exhilarating and all-consuming, driving us to focus our attention intensely on our beloved. Alongside dopamine, norepinephrine is released, contributing to the physiological symptoms of attraction: the racing heart, the sweaty palms, and the feeling of boundless energy. You can talk all night and never feel tired. At the same time, serotonin levels often drop. Serotonin is a mood regulator, and lower levels are associated with obsessive-compulsive behaviors. This drop may explain the intrusive, obsessive thinking that characterizes the early stages of infatuation, where you can't seem to get the other person out of your head. As a relationship matures and moves from passionate infatuation to a more stable, long-term attachment, a different set of chemicals takes over. The primary hormones involved in this bonding phase are oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin is often called the cuddle hormone or bonding hormone. It is released in large quantities during physical touch, such as hugging, kissing, and sexual activity. It fosters feelings of calm, trust, and contentment, solidifying the emotional bond between partners. Vasopressin also plays a critical role in long-term pair bonding. Studies on prairie voles, which are among the few monogamous mammal species, have shown that vasopressin is essential for maintaining their lifelong partnerships. In humans, these hormones work together to create a sense of security and deep attachment, transforming the fiery passion of early love into the warm, comforting glow of a lasting partnership. This chemical shift helps ensure that couples stay together to build a life and potentially raise offspring. Relationships, like individuals, go through developmental stages. The first is often the honeymoon phase, characterized by intense infatuation and idealization. During this period, partners are on their best behavior, and they tend to focus exclusively on each other's positive qualities while overlooking flaws. This is the stage powered by dopamine and norepinephrine, where everything seems perfect and the connection feels effortless. It's a time of discovery, excitement, and building a foundation of positive memories. Eventually, the initial euphoria wanes, and the relationship enters the reality check stage. This is where idealization gives way to disillusionment. Individual differences, annoying habits, and personal flaws become more apparent. This is often the first time real conflicts emerge, as partners must learn to navigate their disagreements and negotiate their needs. This stage is a critical test for the relationship. It's less about whether a couple fights and more about how they fight and whether they can resolve their conflicts constructively. If a couple successfully navigates the reality check stage, they move into a phase of commitment. This isn't just about the decision to stay together. It's about actively choosing to accept each other, flaws and all, and to work as a team. This stage involves building deeper trust and emotional intimacy. Communication becomes more authentic, and partners learn to be vulnerable with one another. It's about consciously building a shared life and strengthening the companionate aspects of their bond. The final stage is one of enduring partnership, or wholehearted love. In this stage, the relationship is a secure base for both individuals. There is a deep sense of trust, mutual respect, and an abiding affection. The couple has a long history of shared experiences, has weathered storms together, and has developed a profound understanding of one another. They operate as a true team, supporting each other's individual growth while nurturing the relationship itself. Love in this stage is less about euphoric highs and more about a deep, steady, and resilient connection. The journey to an enduring partnership is not guaranteed. Relationship psychologist Dr. John Gottman has spent decades studying what makes some relationships succeed while others fail. Through his research, he identified 4 communication patterns that are so destructive that he calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, because their presence is highly predictive of divorce. The first horseman is criticism. This is different from a complaint. A complaint focuses on a specific behavior, such as, "I was worried when you were late and didn't call." A criticism is a global attack on a partner's character. "You're so thoughtless. You never think about how your actions affect me." Criticism attacks the very core of the other person, making them feel assaulted and rejected. The second and most dangerous horseman is contempt. Contempt is any statement or nonverbal behavior that puts you on a higher ground than your partner. It's a communication of disgust, fueled by negative thoughts that have been simmering for a long time. Examples include sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, or hostile humor. Gottman considers contempt the single greatest predictor of divorce because it conveys a fundamental lack of respect. The third horseman is defensiveness. While it may seem like a natural response to criticism or contempt, Gottman argues that it is deeply damaging. Defensiveness is essentially a way of blaming your partner. It says, "The problem isn't me, it's you." It can take the form of making excuses, cross-complaining meeting a complaint with another complaint, or playing the innocent victim. Defensiveness escalates the conflict by invalidating the partner's concerns and preventing either party from taking responsibility. The fourth and final horseman is stonewalling. This occurs when one partner, feeling emotionally flooded or overwhelmed, shuts down and withdraws from the interaction. The stonewaller may become silent, turn away, or act busy. While it may be an attempt to de-escalate the situation, it comes across as disapproval, distance, and disconnection. The partner on the receiving end feels ignored and invalidated, as if they are talking to a brick wall. The good news from Gottman's research is that these destructive patterns can be replaced with healthy, constructive ones. The antidote to criticism is to use a gentle startup, talking about your feelings using I statements and expressing a positive need. The antidote to contempt is to actively build a culture of appreciation and respect, consciously scanning the environment for things to praise and thank your partner for. The antidote to defensiveness is to take responsibility, even for a small part of the problem. And the antidote to stonewalling is to practice physiological self-soothing, learning to recognize when you're becoming overwhelmed and taking a break from the conversation to calm down before re-engaging. Ultimately, the psychology of love teaches us that this powerful emotion is both a feeling and a practice. It is a biological imperative rooted in our brain chemistry and a developmental journey shaped by our earliest experiences. It can be understood through theoretical frameworks, and its health can be measured by our communication patterns. Love is not a passive state of perfect harmony, but an active process of choosing to nurture intimacy, express passion, and honor commitment day after day. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to understand both ourselves and our partners on the deepest levels. It is perhaps the greatest psychological adventure of a lifetime. While we have explored the architecture of love, its chemical foundations, and its developmental stages, we must now turn our attention to its other dark side. For every story of enduring partnership, there is a story of devastating loss. For every bond that nurtures, there is one that poisons. Love, in its most powerful forms, holds the capacity not only to build a life, but to utterly dismantle one. It is a force of creation, and under the wrong circumstances, a force of life destruction. To ignore this darker side is to have only half the map of the human heart. The same systems in our brain that create euphoric attachment can, when ruptured, plunge us into a state of primal panic and despair. This is the precipice from which we will now look down into the abyss of heartbreak, betrayal, and the loss of the ability to ever trust again. The first and most acute way love destroys is through the act of betrayal. Betrayal is a psychological demolition. It doesn't just break the rules of a relationship, it shatters the reality upon which that relationship was built. Whether it takes the form of infidelity, a devastating lie, or the abandonment of a promise, betrayal attacks the core of our need for security. The trust that was once a bedrock becomes quicksand. The shared history, once a source of comfort, becomes a tainted archive of deceit. The mind is sent reeling, forced to reevaluate every memory, every shared laugh, every whispered "I love you," searching for the fracture points, for the moment the truth diverged from the fiction. This is not just emotional pain. It is a cognitive crisis, an erasure of a known world, leaving the betrayed individual disoriented and lost in the ruins of their own life. Infidelity, in particular, is a unique form of trauma because it attacks not only our sense of security, but also our sense of self-worth and desirability. It forces a direct and often brutal comparison with another person. The betrayed partner is left to grapple with agonizing questions. What do they have that I don't? Am I not attractive enough? Not interesting enough? Not good enough? This internal interrogation can be relentless, creating a loop of self-blame and insecurity that can persist long after the relationship is over. The pain is compounded by the public or social nature of the betrayal, adding layers of humiliation and shame to the private grief. It is a deeply personal violation that simultaneously feels like a very public failure. Then there is the slow, grinding erosion of unrequited love. While it may lack the sudden shock of betrayal, its capacity for destruction is just as potent. To love someone who does not love you back is to live in a state of perpetual emotional famine. The mind becomes an echo chamber, replaying small gestures of kindness, misinterpreting them as signs of hope. This obsession can consume one's entire mental landscape, crowding out friendships, ambitions, and even basic self-care. It is a profound state of powerlessness, where one's happiness is entirely contingent on the feelings of another, feelings that are, by definition, beyond one's control. Self-esteem plummets as the constant rejection, whether explicit or implicit, reinforces a narrative of being unwanted and unlovable. This brings us to the insidious realm of the toxic relationship, a category of connection that masquerades as love but functions as a poison. One of the most common and destructive forms is the codependent relationship. Here, the lines between individuals blur into a dysfunctional fusion. One partner, the enabler, derives their sense of purpose and worth from saving or fixing the other, who may be struggling with addiction, instability, or chronic neediness. The enabler sacrifices their own needs, dreams, and well-being on the altar of the relationship, mistaking self-negation for devotion. This is not a partnership. It is a hostage situation of the soul, where one person's identity is entirely consumed by the others, leaving them hollowed out and lost when the dynamic eventually collapses. Far more sinister is the relationship with a narcissist, which operates on a terrifyingly predictable and destructive cycle of idealization, devaluation, and discard. In the beginning, the narcissist engages in love bombing, creating an intense, intoxicating whirlwind of affection and admiration. They mirror their target's deepest desires, making them feel seen and adored like never before. This is the idealization phase, designed to forge a powerful bond of attachment. However, once the target is secured, the devaluation phase begins. The narcissist starts to subtly, and then overtly, criticize, belittle, and undermine their partner. Compliments are replaced with cutting remarks, affection with cold indifference. This is where psychological tools like gaslighting come into play. Gaslighting is a form of manipulation designed to make the victim question their own sanity. The abuser will deny events that clearly happened, dismiss the victim's feelings as crazy or too sensitive, and systematically distort their perception of reality. The victim begins to lose trust in their own memory, their own judgment, their own feelings. Their world becomes a confusing fog, and the only point of reference, the only source of truth, is the abuser. This creates a profound dependency, as the victim feels they can no longer navigate the world without their manipulator's guidance. It is a complete psychological takeover, an erosion of the self from the inside out. The final stage of the narcissistic cycle is the discard. Once the victim is emotionally depleted, no longer providing the admiration or narcissistic supply that the abuser craves, they are cast aside with a shocking lack of empathy or remorse. The discard is often abrupt and brutal, leaving the victim in a state of profound shock and confusion. They are left with a shattered sense of reality and a self-worth that has been systematically dismantled over months or years. The emotional wreckage is immense, akin to escaping a cult. The victim has been conditioned to believe they are worthless, and now, abandoned, that belief feels horrifyingly true. When such a relationship finally ends, the immediate aftermath is not relief, but a brutal and complex form of grief. Heartbreak is not a metaphor. It is a legitimate psychological and physiological event. The brain, accustomed to the attachment hormones of oxytocin and dopamine associated with the partner, goes into a state of withdrawal, similar to that experienced by a drug addict. This withdrawal manifests as intense cravings for the person, obsessive thoughts, and a profound sense of emptiness. The pain is real, activating the same regions in the brain as physical pain. In extreme cases, this can lead to a condition called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, or broken heart syndrome, a temporary weakening of the heart muscle brought on by severe emotional stress. This period of grieving is often accompanied by an acute identity crisis. In a long-term or intense relationship, our sense of self can become fused with our partners. We are part of a we. Our routines, social circles, future plans, and even our daily habits are intertwined. When the relationship is severed, it is a psychological amputation. The question that haunts the newly single individual is, who am I without them? The shared future evaporates, leaving a terrifying void. The process of rebuilding is not just about getting over the person. It's about rediscovering, or in some cases, creating for the first time, a sense of self that is whole and independent. The mind, in its attempt to process the trauma, can become a prison of rumination. It will replay the relationship's highlight reel and its final, painful scenes over and over again. This is not a voluntary process. The brain is desperately trying to make sense of what happened, to find an answer, a reason, a way to regain a sense of control over a situation that was uncontrollable. This obsessive loop can be debilitating, preventing the individual from engaging with the present moment and moving forward. It keeps the wound fresh, pouring salt on it with every replayed memory and every unanswered question. Sleep is disrupted, appetite is lost, and the body is flooded with the stress hormone cortisol, which, over long periods, can have damaging effects on physical health. The most profound and lasting damage from a destructive love is attachment trauma. Our internal working model of relationships, our fundamental belief in the safety and reliability of others, is shattered. If someone who was supposed to love and protect us became the source of our greatest pain, how can we ever trust anyone again? This trauma fundamentally rewires our attachment style. A person who was once securely attached can be thrust into a state of anxious or avoidant attachment. They may become hypervigilant, constantly scanning new partners for signs of danger, unable to relax into intimacy. Or they may become emotionally walled off, equating vulnerability with guaranteed pain and choosing solitude as a form of self-preservation. This leads to a pervasive and deep-seated fear of reattachment. The prospect of opening oneself up to another person feels less like a potential for joy and more like a gamble with unbearable stakes. The memory of the pain is so visceral that the subconscious mind will do anything to avoid a repeat experience. This can manifest as self-sabotage. A person might find fault with every potential new partner, pushing them away for minor imperfections. Or they might flee at the first sign of genuine intimacy, as the feelings of closeness trigger the deeply ingrained fear of impending abandonment or betrayal. The desire for connection, a fundamental human need, is now at war with the equally powerful need for self-protection. For victims of severe manipulation or narcissistic abuse, the damage often evolves into a condition known as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD. Unlike traditional PTSD, which usually stems from a single traumatic event, CPTSD arises from prolonged, repeated trauma where the victim is in a state of captivity with no viable means of escape. A toxic relationship perfectly fits this description. The symptoms are pervasive, affecting one's emotional regulation, consciousness, self-perception, and relationships with others. Victims may struggle with chronic feelings of emptiness, shame, and guilt, and find it incredibly difficult to form healthy, trusting bonds. The trauma is not just a memory. It is a ghost in the machine of their personality, influencing their reactions and perceptions long after they have escaped the source of the abuse. One of the cruelest ironies of attachment trauma is a phenomenon known as repetition compulsion. This is an unconscious psychological drive to reenact traumatic events or relationships. A person who was abandoned by a parent or betrayed by a partner may find themselves repeatedly drawn to emotionally unavailable or untrustworthy individuals. This is not a conscious choice or a desire to be hurt again. Rather, it is the psyche's desperate, misguided attempt to gain mastery over the original trauma. The unconscious hope is, this time it will be different. This time I will make them stay. This time I will be good enough to be loved. Of course, this almost always leads to a re-experiencing of the original pain, reinforcing the core belief that one is destined to be abandoned or betrayed. The destruction of trust extends beyond romantic partners. A severe betrayal can curdle one's entire worldview, fostering a deep-seated cynicism. If the person I loved most was capable of this, then anyone is. This belief system makes the world feel like a fundamentally unsafe place. It can lead to social isolation, as even friendships are viewed through a lens of suspicion. The person becomes guarded and withdrawn, unwilling to let anyone get close enough to hurt them. This protective shell, while built to keep pain out, also prevents love, joy, and genuine connection from getting in, creating a lonely and impoverished existence. Healing from this level of destruction is not a simple process of moving on. It is a long, arduous journey of psychological reconstruction. The first step is allowing oneself to fully grieve the loss, not just the loss of the person, but the loss of the future that was promised, the loss of the reality that was believed in, and the loss of the part of oneself that was given away. Suppressing this grief will only cause it to fester. It must be felt in its entirety: the anger, the sadness, the confusion, the despair. This process requires immense courage, as it means willingly walking back into the fire of the pain. The next crucial phase is the reclaiming of the self. For individuals who have been victims of gaslighting or codependency, this is a process of learning to trust their own perceptions again. It involves journaling, therapy, and mindfulness practices designed to reconnect them with their own thoughts, feelings, and intuition. It is about relearning the sound of their own inner voice after it has been silenced for so long. It also involves rediscovering personal interests, hobbies, and goals that were abandoned during the relationship. This is not about distraction. It is about rebuilding an identity that is independent and whole, an identity that does not rely on another person for its validation or existence. A critical part of this healing journey is the establishment of rigid boundaries. Individuals who have been in toxic relationships often have porous or non-existent boundaries. They learn, through painful experience, the necessity of saying no. They learn to identify red flags and to walk away from situations and people that do not feel right, even if they can't logically explain why. This is the process of rebuilding the internal security system that was disabled by the trauma. Boundaries become the non-negotiable rules of engagement for all future relationships, a declaration that one's well-being is no longer up for debate. Ultimately, the most difficult and most important task is to rebuild trust in oneself. It's the trust in one's own judgment to choose better partners in the future. It's the trust in one's own resilience to survive if things go wrong again. It's the trust that one is inherently worthy of love and respect, regardless of how they were treated in the past. This is a slow process, built brick by brick, with every act of self-care, every healthy choice, and every moment that they choose to believe in their own worth. While the scars of a destructive love may never completely disappear, they can be integrated into a new, stronger sense of self. The experience, as devastating as it was, can lead to what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. Having survived the worst, a person can emerge with a deeper sense of empathy, a greater appreciation for genuine kindness, a clearer understanding of what they want and deserve, and an unwillingness to ever again settle for a love that diminishes them. The journey through the darkness, while excruciating, can ultimately lead to a more authentic and self-aware life. They may learn to love again, not with the naive innocence of before, but with the profound wisdom of a survivor who understands that the greatest risk in love is not getting your heart broken, but losing yourself in the process. Now, history is not merely a record of wars, dynasties, and discoveries. It is the grand, sprawling diary of the human heart. And within this diary, certain stories of love are written in indelible ink, not because they were perfect, but because they were powerful enough to alter the course of empires, challenge the foundations of faith, and redefine the very meaning of sacrifice. These are not fairy tales. They are complex, often brutal, psychological case studies played out on the world stage. By examining these historical accounts, we can move beyond the abstract theories of love and witness its real-world consequences, observing how attachment, obsession, trauma, and devotion can shape destinies and echo through centuries. We will now delve into three such monumental loves: the all-consuming passion of Antony and Cleopatra, the intellectual and spiritual saga of Abelard and Helios, and the throne-shattering codependency of Edward Roman VIII and Wallis Simpson. Each is a world unto itself, a testament to love's capacity to be the driving force behind both our most noble and our most self-destructive acts. Our first case study takes us back to the clash of civilizations, to the decadent shores of the Nile and the rigid marble halls of Rome. The love story of Marcus Antonius and Cleopatra the Seventh is perhaps the most enduring archetype of passionate, world-destroying love. To understand its psychological impact, one must first understand the two titans at its center. Antony was a man of immense appetites for power, for pleasure, for glory. He was one of Rome's greatest generals, a man of action and charisma, but also a man entering his middle years, increasingly weary of the political machinations of Rome and its stern, unforgiving morality. He was, in modern psychological terms, a personality ripe for a crisis, a man looking for a world that would not just accommodate his greatness, but celebrate his excesses. He was a powerhouse of ID, barely constrained by the Roman superego. Cleopatra, on the other hand, was the product of 300 years of Ptolemaic incest, ambition, and intellectual brilliance. She was not merely a seductress, as Roman propaganda would have us believe. She was a formidable intellectual, a cunning strategist, and a polyglot who commanded fleets and managed an entire economy. Her primary psychological driver was survival, the survival of her dynasty and the independence of her kingdom, which was being slowly suffocated by the ever-expanding Roman Republic. She had already used her charisma and intellect to forge a crucial alliance with Julius Caesar, bearing him a son. When Antony summoned her to Tarsus to answer for her loyalties after Caesar's assassination, she was not approaching as a supplicant. She was approaching as a psychologist, having studied her target with meticulous care. The famous meeting at Tarsus was a masterpiece of psychological theater. Cleopatra did not come to Antony, she made Antony come to her. She sailed up the river Cydnus in a magnificent barge, dressed as the goddess Venus, surrounded by attendants. This was not mere pageantry. It was a calculated act of narcissistic mirroring. She presented herself not as a vassal queen, but as a goddess, a divine being worthy of Antony, who himself was often compared to the demigod Hercules. She was reflecting back to him his own grandiose self-image, creating an immediate and intoxicating rapport. From a psychological perspective, this was a form of high-stakes love bombing. She created an environment of such overwhelming sensual and ego-affirming pleasure that Antony's rational, Roman mind was instantly disarmed. He was captivated not just by her beauty or wit, but by the reflection of his most powerful self that he saw in her eyes. Their ensuing relationship in Alexandria was a deep dive into what we might now diagnose as a shared folie due, a madness shared by two. They created a private world, a bubble of indulgence and fantasy, forming their own society called the Inimitable Livers, dedicated to nightly feasts, drinking, and elaborate games. This was a psychological retreat from the crushing responsibilities they both faced. For Antony, it was an escape from the political rivalry with the cold, calculating Octavian and the rigid expectations of Roman duty. For Cleopatra, it was a way to bind Antony to her, to enmesh his identity so completely with hers, and with Egypt that he could never be disentangled. Their codependency was forged in this crucible of pleasure. He provided the military might to protect her kingdom, and she provided the unconditional adoration and freedom from judgment that his ego so desperately craved. The psychological impact of this dynamic on Antony was profound. He began to go native, adopting Eastern dress and customs, a process that Roman historians described with horror. This was more than a change of wardrobe. It was a shedding of his Roman identity. He was abandoning the gravitas and discipline that were the bedrock of a Roman leader's psyche. In Cleopatra's world, he was not just one of two triumvirs. He was a king, a living god. This fulfilled a narcissistic need that Rome could never satisfy. However, this also made him incredibly vulnerable. By tying his self-worth entirely to Cleopatra and their shared world, he lost his objective, strategic footing. His decisions became increasingly emotional and short-sighted, driven by the need to maintain their intoxicating reality rather than the geopolitical realities of the Roman world. Their love operated in the realm of John Lee's eros and mania love styles. It was intensely passionate, possessive, and all-consuming. They were addicted to the intensity of their connection, and like any addiction, it led to destructive behavior. This culminated in the disastrous Battle of Actium. When Cleopatra's fleet inexplicably retreated from the battle, Antony, in a moment of catastrophic emotional reasoning, abandoned his own massive fleet and his legions to follow her single ship. A Roman general would never do this. It was a complete breakdown of his military identity, a public declaration that his attachment to her superseded his duty, his honor, and his men. From a psychological standpoint, his ability to compartmentalize had been completely eroded. His identity as Antony, the lover of Cleopatra, had consumed the identity of Antony, the Roman general. The final act of their story is a case study in despair, miscommunication, and the psychology of romanticized suicide. After their defeat, holed up in Alexandria with Octavian's forces closing in, their psychological bubble finally burst, and reality flooded in. Hearing a false report of Cleopatra's death, Antony fell into a state of profound narcissistic injury and despair. His world, which had been entirely centered on her, had ceased to exist. His suicide by falling on his sword was an attempt to follow her into the afterlife, a final, desperate act of attachment. It was not a rational decision, but a primal response to unbearable psychological pain, the pain of abandonment, and the complete collapse of his constructed reality. Cleopatra's suicide was more calculated, but no less psychologically profound. With Antony dead and her kingdom lost, she was faced with the ultimate humiliation, being paraded through the streets of Rome in Octavian's triumph. For a ruler who had identified herself with the goddess Isis, who had wielded immense power and held the fate of a nation in her hands, this was a fate worse than death. It was the complete annihilation of her identity and legacy. Her suicide, famously by the bite of an asp, was her final act of agency. It was a carefully staged event, designed to preserve her dignity and cheat her conqueror of his ultimate prize. It was a conscious choice to control her own narrative, to die a queen in Egypt rather than live as a prisoner in Rome. The enduring psychological legacy of Antony and Cleopatra is immense. Their story has become the archetypal narrative of a love so powerful it defies empires and reason. It has seeped into our collective unconscious, shaping our cultural scripts about passionate love. It romanticizes the idea of losing oneself completely in another person, of a love for which one would sacrifice everything: duty, honor, country, and life itself. This narrative, while compelling, is psychologically perilous. It glorifies codependency and elevates emotional obsession to the status of a noble ideal. It teaches us that the greatest love is a destructive one, a fire that consumes everything in its path. Generations have been captivated by this story, internalizing the belief that a love that doesn't feel all-consuming might not be true love at all, a dangerous yardstick that can lead people to mistake toxic intensity for genuine intimacy. Our second story takes us from the political battlefields of the ancient world to the intellectual and spiritual battlefields of 12th century Paris. The love of Peter Abelard and Héloïse is one of history's most complex and heartbreaking tales, a profound exploration of the collision between carnal desire, intellectual passion, and spiritual devotion. It is a story whose psychological impact was so immense, it was recorded for posterity, not by historians, but by the two individuals themselves, in a series of letters that serve as one of the earliest and most searing examples of psychological autobiography. Peter Abelard was, by all accounts, the most brilliant and famous philosopher of his age. He was a man of supreme intellect and equally supreme arrogance. His mind was his weapon, and he used it to dismantle the arguments of his rivals with ruthless precision. He was the intellectual superstar of his day, surrounded by adoring students. Psychologically, Abelard was a narcissist, but a cerebral one. His sense of self was built entirely on his intellectual prowess. He saw himself as superior to all others, and this intellectual vanity left little room for emotional vulnerability. He was a man who lived entirely in his head, a master of logic who was a novice in the affairs of the heart. Héloïse was a phenomenon in her own right. The niece of a prominent church official, Canon Fulbert, she possessed an intellect that was considered equal, if not superior, to Abelard's. She was fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, a prodigy of learning in an age when such pursuits were almost exclusively the domain of men. Psychologically, she was a woman whose intellectual fire was trapped within the rigid confines of medieval society. She was brilliant but powerless, a mind without a recognized stage on which to perform. Her hunger for knowledge was matched only by her frustration with the limitations placed upon her gender. The catalyst for their tragedy was a collision of these two powerful minds. Abelard, seeking a new conquest, contrived to become Héloïse's live-in tutor. What began, by his own admission, as a cynical seduction, quickly transformed into something far more profound. They discovered in each other an intellectual equal, a sapiosexual attraction where the meeting of their minds was as intoxicating as any physical act. Their tutoring sessions became a pretext for a passionate, all-consuming affair. For Abelard, this was a new kind of conquest, one that engaged his mind as well as his body. For Héloïse, it was likely the first time she had been seen and valued for the full scope of her intellect, an incredibly powerful aphrodisiac for a woman in her position. Their love was a rebellion against the conventions of their time, a secret world built on shared ideas and forbidden desires. The psychological dynamics were, however, fraught with peril. There was an immense power imbalance. He was the famous older teacher, she the young, dependent student. Their affair was an act of extreme transgression, and the thrill of this secrecy likely intensified their bond. When Héloïse became pregnant, their private world shattered. In an attempt to placate her furious uncle, Abelard agreed to a secret marriage. But here, their psychologies diverged. Abelard was primarily concerned with the damage to his career and reputation as a celibate cleric and philosopher. Héloïse, with startling insight, argued against the marriage, claiming it would ruin them both and that she preferred to be his whore than his wife, valuing their love above any social contract. This reveals her deep-seated belief that their connection existed on a higher plane than societal rules, and perhaps a premonition that trying to contain it within convention would destroy it. The discovery of the marriage by Cannon Fulbert led to the central, horrific trauma of their lives. Seeking a brutal revenge for what he perceived as the dishonor of his family, Fulbert hired men to break into Abelard's room and castrate him. This act was one of profound and multi-layered violence. It was not just a physical mutilation, it was a psychological annihilation. For Abelard, whose identity was built on his power and dominance, it was a complete stripping away of his manhood. It was a source of unimaginable public humiliation for a man defined by his pride. The trauma was so severe that it precipitated a complete psychic collapse. He retreated from the world, becoming a monk, not out of spiritual calling, but out of shame and despair. He then forced Héloïse, against her will, to take the veil and become a nun, an act of control born from his own shattered state, effectively imprisoning her for a love she did not regret. For years, they lived separate lives, entombed in their respective monasteries. The love that had been a source of ecstatic connection was now the source of their shared damnation. The psychological impact of this trauma festered in silence until Abelard wrote his Historia Calamitatum, the story of my calamities, a self-pitying autobiographical letter. When a copy of this letter found its way to Héloïse, it reopened the wound and initiated their famous correspondence. These letters are a raw and astonishing record of two minds grappling with the wreckage of their past. They represent a psychological battle over the meaning of their love. Abelard's letters are a study in the psychological defense mechanism of sublimation. He desperately tries to reframe their passionate, carnal history into a spiritual, Platonic narrative. He attempts to spiritualize their love, casting himself as her spiritual guide and brother in Christ. He intellectualizes their suffering, arguing that it was God's will, a necessary cruelty to save them from their lust and lead them to a holier life. This was his way of coping with the trauma of his castration and the guilt of his actions. By denying the carnal reality of their past, he could make his present, emasculated state bearable. He needed to believe their suffering had a higher purpose. Héloïse's letters, in stark contrast, are a testament to the enduring power of psychological trauma and undeclared grief. She refuses his spiritual reframing. Her words are a raw, searing cry of pain and rage. She writes that she has never repented their love, that she still longs for him physically, and that her religious devotion is a sham performed out of obedience to him. She is brutally honest about her psychological state. A woman living in a state of cognitive dissonance, forced to perform the role of a pious abbess, while her heart and mind are still consumed by the memory of their carnal love. She accuses him and God of cruelty and exposes the hypocrisy of his attempt to rewrite their history. Her letters are a rebellion against the silencing of her truth, a refusal to allow her trauma and her desire to be spiritualized away. The psychological legacy of Abelard and Héloïse is the eternal conflict between the flesh and the spirit, the mind and the body. Their story is a powerful testament to how a profound trauma can irrevocably alter the course of a relationship and the identities of the individuals within it. Abelard's castration was a literal and metaphorical severing, forcing their love to either die or transform. Their correspondence is a monument to that transformation. While they never met again, they forged a new kind of bond, one built on shared memory, intellectual debate, and a lifetime of unresolved grief. Their story has become an archetype for intellectual love and for the idea that a connection of minds can be as powerful and as enduring as any physical union. It is a foundational text in the psychology of love, demonstrating that even after the body is broken and passion is forbidden, the attachment, the memory, and the argument of love can continue for a lifetime. Our final story brings us into the harsh glare of the 20th century, a time when the private lives of public figures began to be scrutinized with unprecedented intensity. The story of King Edward Roman VIII and Wallis Simpson is not one of ancient passion or medieval tragedy, but a modern psychological drama of codependency, sacrifice, and the collision of personal desire with the immense weight of institutional duty. It is the story of a king who gave up an empire for the woman he loved, an act that was framed as the ultimate romance, but can also be read as the ultimate abdication of self. To understand the psychology of their bond, we must first understand the man who would be king. Prince Edward, known as David to his family, was the heir to the British throne, a global empire upon which the sun never set. He was charismatic, stylish, and immensely popular with the public. Yet, beneath the surface, he was a deeply insecure and emotionally stunted man. He was raised by a cold, domineering father, King George V, and a distant mother. His upbringing was rigid, emotionally sterile, and entirely focused on his future role as monarch. Psychologically, he was a perpetual adolescent, chafing under the suffocating constraints of his duty, craving freedom and unconditional acceptance, which his royal role could never provide. He was a man-child, desperate for a powerful figure who could both mother him and liberate him. Wallis Simpson was, in almost every way, his psychological opposite. A twice-divorced American socialite, she was confident, ambitious, witty, and utterly unimpressed by the stuffy protocols of the British aristocracy. She was a dominant, assertive personality who had navigated a difficult life with grit and determination. She was not beautiful in a conventional sense, but she possessed a magnetic self-assurance. Psychologically, she projected an aura of control and worldly experience that the sheltered prince found irresistible. She treated him not as the heir to the throne, but as a man, offering a brand of intimacy and directness he had never known. Their attraction can be seen through the lens of attachment theory. Edward, with his insecure attachment stemming from a childhood of emotional neglect, saw in Wally's a secure, powerful base. He latched onto her with a desperate intensity. She became the center of his universe, the sole arbiter of his happiness. Observers from the time noted his almost slavish devotion to her, his constant need for her approval, and his anxiety when she was not present. This was not the balanced affection of a mature partnership. It was the all-consuming attachment of a dependent child to a caregiver. He outsourced his emotional regulation to her, making her responsible for his happiness and sense of self-worth. For Wally's, the attraction was more complex. She was undoubtedly drawn to the immense power and status he represented. To capture the heart of the most eligible bachelor in the world was the ultimate social conquest. But the dynamic likely went deeper. His palpable need for her, his willingness to place her at the very center of his existence, would have been a powerful narcissistic supply. She held absolute power over a man who held symbolic power over a quarter of the globe. This created a deeply enmeshed, codependent dyad. He needed her to feel like a man. She needed his devotion to feel powerful. They were, in a psychological sense, two halves of a dysfunctional whole, each filling a profound void in the other. This intense codependency led directly to the abdication crisis of 1936. When Edward ascended to the throne, he was determined to marry Wally's. But for the British establishment, a twice-divorced American with 2 living ex-husbands was an impossible choice for a queen consort and wife of the head of the Church of England. Edward was presented with an ultimatum: the throne or Mrs. Simpson. For the government and his family, the choice was obvious. Duty to the empire came first. But for Edward, this was not a choice between duty and love. It was a choice between a life he experienced as a suffocating prison and the woman he saw as his only source of salvation and authentic selfhood. His decision to abdicate was, in his mind, the ultimate romantic gesture. In his famous radio address, he told the world he found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love. Psychologically, this speech was a masterclass in reframing. He cast his decision not as a failure of duty, but as an act of noble emotional integrity. This is a classic example of choice-supportive bias, a cognitive bias, where, after making a decision, people tend to overfocus on its positive attributes and ignore the negatives to justify the choice. He had to believe it was the greatest love story ever told, because the alternative, that he had abandoned his sacred duty for a dysfunctional obsession, was psychologically unbearable. The aftermath aftermath of the abdication, their life as the Duke and Duchess of Windsor reveals the long-term psychological consequences of his choice. They were forced into a life of gilded exile, drifting aimlessly between Paris and New York, indulging in a life of luxury, but stripped of any real purpose or relevance. Edward had sacrificed everything for her, a psychological debt of unimaginable weight. This placed an immense burden on their relationship. It had to be a perfect, epic love to justify the loss of a crown and an empire. Any conflict, any unhappiness, would call the entire narrative of his grand sacrifice into question. Accounts from their inner circle paint a picture of a relationship that was often tense and filled with a subtle, underlying bitterness. He remained utterly dependent on her, while she, in turn, often treated him with a domineering, almost contemptuous air. They were trapped in their narrative, forced to perform the role of the world's greatest romantics, while living with the reality of their shared, empty existence. He had given up his entire identity for her, and in doing so, had become a man with no role left to play. She was married to a king who was no longer a king, a hollowed-out symbol of what might have been. Their life together was not a celebration of love, but a constant, 35-year attempt to justify a single, life-altering decision. The psychological legacy of Edward and Wally's is a powerful and cautionary one. On the surface, their story is the ultimate fantasy of love conquering all, the triumph of individual desire over institutional constraint. It has fueled a modern obsession with the personal lives of royals and the idea that true love requires grand, public sacrifice. However, a deeper psychological reading reveals a darker story. It is a testament to the destructive power of codependency, a warning against the dangers of making another person the sole source of one's identity and happiness. It demonstrates that the greatest sacrifice for love is not a throne or a kingdom, but the sacrifice of one's own independent self. Their story forces us to ask unsettling questions. When does devotion become dependency? When does love cease to be a partnership and become a prison? And can any one person, no matter how beloved, ever be enough to fill the void left by the abdication of one's entire world? We have journeyed through the annals of history, witnessing how love can build and destroy empires, inspire intellectual devotion, and lead to the abdication of a throne. Now, we must talk about human psyche. We will explore a form of connection that is often tragically mistaken for the deepest love, but which is, in reality, its most insidious and destructive imposter, codependency. This is the psychology of the moth drawn to a flame, the rescuer who requires a victim, the lover who thrives on being needed by a partner who is fundamentally broken. To an outsider, it is a baffling spectacle of self-destruction. Why would anyone pour their life, their energy, their very soul into a person who gives back only pain, chaos, and cruelty? The answer is not simple. It is not about weakness or a lack of intelligence. The answer is a complex, deeply ingrained psychological script written in the ink of childhood trauma, wired into the brain by the chemistry of addiction, and performed as a desperate, unconscious attempt to heal an old wound. Codependency is a pathology of connection, a disorder of the self. At its heart, it is an excessive, all-consuming emotional and psychological reliance on a partner. While this dynamic can exist in many forms, it is most starkly and commonly observed when one partner, the identified patient or the taker, requires constant support due to an illness, a personality disorder, or, most classically, an addiction. The other partner, the caregiver, or the enabler, becomes the central support system. But this is not a healthy, balanced act of care. Instead, the caregiver's entire sense of self-worth and identity becomes contingent on this role. Their purpose for existing is defined by their partner's neediness. They are not merely in a relationship with a person. They are in a relationship with a person's problems. This dynamic is a toxic, symbiotic dance. The taker, consumed by their addiction or chaos, needs someone to manage their life, to clean up their messes, and to absorb the consequences of their actions. The caregiver, driven by a deep-seated compulsion, needs to be needed. They derive a powerful, albeit dysfunctional, sense of purpose from being the good one, the responsible one, the one who holds it all together. This role provides them with an identity, a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic situation, and often a feeling of moral superiority. They may complain about the burden, but on an unconscious level, the burden is what gives their life meaning. Without the chaos to manage, without the person to fix, they would be left with a terrifying emptiness, a confrontation with a self they have long since abandoned. The question remains, why does this dynamic persist even in the face of cruelty? Why does the caregiver stay when the addict they are trying to save verbally abuses them, lies to them, steals from them, or betrays them? The answer is that the cruelty is not a deterrent to the dynamic. It is an integral part of it. The cycle of addiction and codependency thrives on crisis. It is a roller coaster of intense drama, and it is this very intensity that the codependent brain mistakes for intimacy and love. The periods of calm are merely the slow climb up the hill of a roller coaster. The real, addictive rush comes from the crisis, the fight, the breakdown, followed by the temporary, desperate reconciliation. This cycle of pain and relief is profoundly addictive, and it is the glue that holds this destructive bond together. To truly understand how a person becomes so trapped, we must perform a psychological excavation, digging down to the very foundations of their personality. The blueprint for codependency is almost always drawn in childhood. The codependent adult was was often a parentified child, a child who, due to a parent's addiction, illness, or emotional immaturity, was forced to take on the role of the caregiver at a young age. This child learns a set of devastating lessons about love. They learn that their own needs are irrelevant and burdensome. They learn that their value does not come from who they are, but from what they do for others. They learn that love is not something you receive freely, but something you must earn through constant service and self-sacrifice. Their internal working model of attachment is wired to believe, to be loved, I must be needed, to be safe, I must be indispensable. This child carries this model into adulthood. They are not consciously seeking out broken partners, but they are unconsciously drawn to people and situations that feel familiar, that allow them to replay the role they know so well. A healthy, stable, and self-sufficient partner may feel boring or, on a deeper level, threatening to them. A partner with no problems to solve offers them no role to play, no way to prove their worth. And so, they find themselves drawn to the chaos of an addict or the intense neediness of a person with a personality disorder. This feels like home. It feels like love because it is the only version of love their nervous system has ever learned. This dynamic is then cemented by a powerful psychological phenomenon known as trauma bonding. A trauma bond is a deep, loyal attachment that forms in the context of danger, shame, and abuse. It is the same mechanism that can cause hostages to develop feelings for their captors, a phenomenon known as Stockholm Syndrome. The bond is not based on love and respect, but on a shared, intense, and often terrifying emotional experience. In a codependent relationship, the bond is forged and strengthened by the intermittent reinforcement of the abuse cycle. This cycle typically has 3 phases: a tension-building phase, an explosion or crisis, and a honeymoon or reconciliation phase. The honeymoon phase is the most insidious and powerful part of the trap. After an episode of cruelty, a drunken rage, a period of silent treatment, a discovery of betrayal, the taker, fearing abandonment, will often become intensely remorseful and loving. They will apologize profusely, make grand promises to change, and shower the caregiver with affection and praise. This is the fix the caregiver has been waiting for. This sudden switch from cruelty to kindness creates a massive surge of the bonding hormone oxytocin and the reward neurotransmitter dopamine in the caregiver's brain. It feels like an incredible relief, a validation that their suffering has paid off. They cling to this moment, believing this is the real person, and the abusive behavior was just an aberration. This unpredictable, intermittent reward, the occasional moment of kindness amidst a sea of pain, is the most powerful reinforcement schedule known to behavioral psychology. It is the principle that keeps a gambler pulling the lever on a slot machine, and it is what keeps the codependent partner locked in the relationship. forever gambling for the next small payout of affection. The brain of a codependent caregiver is, in a very real sense, the brain of an addict. They are addicted not to a substance, but to a person, and to the emotional roller coaster of the relationship. The cycle of stress and relief creates a powerful chemical dependency. During the tension and crisis phases, their body is flooded with the stress hormone cortisol. When the crisis is temporarily resolved, the cortisol is replaced by a rush of dopamine. They become addicted to this swing from agony to relief. The drama of the relationship provides a constant source of adrenaline and purpose. In the absence of this drama, they feel anxious, bored, and empty. They are addicted to hope, the hope that this time the promises will be real, that their love will finally be enough to cure their partner. This hope is a drug, and they will endure almost any amount of pain to get their next hit. Over time, this dynamic leads to a profound erosion of the caregiver's self. Their entire life begins to revolve around managing their partner's life. Their own hobbies, friendships, and career ambitions are slowly sacrificed. They become isolated as the shame and chaos of the relationship are difficult to explain to outsiders. Their world shrinks until it contains only them and their partner's problems. This creates a cognitive dissonance, a deep psychological discomfort that arises from holding two conflicting beliefs. I am being treated terribly, and I am choosing to stay in this relationship. To resolve this dissonance, the caregiver must create a powerful narrative to justify their reality. This narrative is built on a foundation of denial and rationalization. They will minimize the abuse. It's not that bad. He didn't mean it. They will blame themselves. If I hadn't pushed him, he wouldn't have gotten so angry. They will romanticize their suffering, seeing it as a sign of their loyalty and the depth of their love. And most powerfully, they cling to the illusion of control. They believe that they are the key to their partner's recovery. They think, if I am just more patient, more loving, more supportive, he will change. This belief, while false, is essential. To let go of the illusion of control is to admit that they are utterly powerless over their partner's addiction or behavior. And to admit powerlessness is to face the terrifying truth that all their sacrifice may have been for nothing. This truth is often too devastating to contemplate. Beneath this complex web of trauma, brain chemistry, and cognitive distortion lies the caregiver's deepest and most primal fear, the fear of abandonment. But it is not just the fear of being alone. It is the fear of being unnecessary. Their entire identity has been built on the foundation of being needed. If their partner were to get better, or if they were to leave, they would be faced with a terrifying existential question. Who am I, if not a caregiver? What is my purpose, if not to save someone else? The relationship, for all its pain, protects them from this void. The cruelty they endure is, in a twisted way, preferable to the emptiness they fear they would find within themselves. The pain of the relationship is at least a feeling, a sign that they are alive and engaged in a struggle of epic importance. The silence that would follow is, to them, a kind of death. Breaking free from a codependent relationship is therefore not a matter of simply deciding to leave. It is a process of excruciating psychological withdrawal. When the caregiver finally does separate, they are not met with immediate relief, but with an overwhelming wave of guilt, anxiety, and a profound sense of purposelessness. Their entire biological and psychological system is screaming at them to go back to what is familiar, to get their fix of the drama and the reconciliation. They are flooded with obsessive thoughts about their partner, often remembering only the good times, the potential they saw, the person they were trying to save. This is the addiction in its death throes, a desperate attempt to lure the user back. The path to recovery is a long and arduous journey of rebuilding a self that has been systematically dismantled. It begins with the painful process of detaching, often requiring a period of strict no contact to allow the brain and nervous system to reset. It then involves the difficult work of turning inward, of finally attending to the needs that have been suppressed for a lifetime. This is the work of therapy, of support groups like Codependence Anonymous, where they can learn from others who have walked the same path. It is the process of learning to set boundaries, of learning that no is a complete sentence and an act of profound self-love. It is about rediscovering their own interests, their own desires, their own voice. Most fundamentally, recovery from codependency is the process of healing the original childhood wound. It is about grieving for the child who had to grow up too soon, who was taught that their worth was conditional. It is about learning for the first time to reparent oneself, to provide the unconditional love, acceptance, and security that was missing in their formative years. It is about learning to self-soothe, to manage one's own anxiety and find validation from within, rather than constantly seeking it from the outside. It is a journey from sacrificing the self for others to cherishing the self as a prerequisite for any healthy connection. It is the realization that true love does not ask you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. True love is a partnership between two whole, self-sufficient individuals who choose to share their light, not two broken people desperately trying to find wholeness in the wreckage of the other.